In our most recent lesson, we're using double angle formulas to find trig values. And if you suffer through this video, you're going to get 3 free assignment answers. So bear with me. In problem 1, we're given that the cosine of a particular angle theta is negative 5/13. We are also told that our theta is between pi and 3 pi over 2. Now, in case you don't know how to interpret that, that's just telling us what quadrant we're in. So remember, your unit circle starts at 0 and it advances around counterclockwise. Pi over 2 is up here. Here's pi, and here's 3 pi over 2. So if our angle is between pi and 3 pi over 2, it's down here somewhere in the third quadrant. The main thing you need to know is both ordered pairs, or both coordinates in the ordered pairs are negative, meaning the sine and the cosine both have negative values there. And you can see that the cosine of theta is negative 5/13. When we find the sine value, we need to make sure that we have a negative for that as well. Now, why do we need the sine value, you might be thinking? Well, because we are asked to find the sine of 2 theta. Oops. Let's try the highlighter here. Sine of 2 theta, that's what we're looking for. In order to do that, we need to go over to our identity and find out what the sine of 2 theta equals. The sine of 2 theta equals 2 times sine theta times cosine theta. And we know the cosine theta, so we've got that taken care of. We're going to put negative 5/13 in for that one. What we don't know is the sine of theta. And that's where this unit circle comes in. So what we're going to do is we're going to draw the old triangle back from our first days of studying trigonometry. Remember that the sine and cosine ratios are ratios of sides in a right triangle. So if I have angle theta and the cosine is negative 5/13, that means the adjacent side is negative 5 and the hypotenuse is 13. And then we can use the Pythagorean Theorem to solve for this opposite side. We need that opposite side to figure out the sine of theta. So to do that, we'll use a Pythagorean Theorem, and that question mark is just going to be, I'm going to have to draw it over here, the square root of 169, which is 13 squared, minus 25, which is negative 5 squared. And 169 minus 25 is 144, and so that equals 12. Now remember, we are in the third quadrant, so our sine value has to be negative. And since we've already made 13, the denominator, to be positive, we have to make this opposite side negative 12. So because we're in the third quadrant, we really need the negative of the square root of 144. Once we have that, we now know that the sine of theta is no longer a question mark. It is negative 12 over 13. So if we want to compute the value of sine of 2 theta, we do 2 times negative 12 over 13 times negative 5 over 13. And negative 12 times negative 5 is 60, and 60 times 2 is 120. So that's 120 over 13 times 13, which is 169. And once we have that value, we cross our fingers and hope that we see that in our list of multiple choices. And as it turns out, yeah, letter B is 120 over 169. So there's free answer number 1. We're going to play a similar game for free answer number 2. We're given that the sine of theta is the negative 2 square root of 6 over 5. And we're told that theta is between 3 pi over 2 and 2 pi. So let's go back to that unit circle that we sketched on the last picture. Remember, it was 0, pi over 2, pi. 3 pi over 2 was down here. And then if you make it almost all the way around, you're back to 2 pi. What that's telling us is that theta is in this fourth quadrant. The cosine values are positive there and the sine values are negative. Well, we already see that we're given a negative sine value, so that's good news. If we have to find a cosine value, we better make sure that it's positive. Now remember that we're asked to find the cosine of 2 theta. And over here in our chart with the identities, we actually have 3 choices. So what you want to do is you want to choose the version of this identity that matches the information you have. The only information we have right now is sine of theta is negative 2 square root of 6 over 5. So I'm going to pick the formula that just has sine of theta in it. And so that's the bottom one here. Cosine 2 theta equals 1 minus 2 sine squared theta. This is the version of that identity that we're going to use. So I've written that down. Cosine 2 theta equals 1 minus sine squared, 2 sine squared of theta. Well, we already know what sine of theta is. We just have to square it. So when we figure out this answer, we're just going to do 1 minus 2 times that negative 2 square root of 6 over 5 and then squared because we have sine squared. Okay, so let's do this one step at a time. We're going to square that thing first. So it's 2 times. That's going to be 4 times 6, which is 24 over 25. That's negative 48 over 20. So 1 minus 48 over 25. To do 1 minus 48 over 25, you got to do 25 over 25 minus 48 over 25 because we need a common denominator. And then that's going to end up being negative 23 over 25. So that's our value. We're going to cross our fingers. Oops. We're going to cross our fingers and hope that's one of our choices. And sure enough, take a look. Letter D is negative 23 over 25. And that's great because letter D is the right answer. So there's your free answer number 2. In this case, we did that work to find the quadrant, but because we didn't need the cosine, that turned out to be irrelevant. It's still good to pay attention to it, though, because sometimes you need it. Let's try one more and we'll wrap up this video. Hopefully by now you're starting to feel a little more comfortable with how these problems are set up. In number 8, we're given that the cosine of theta is positive 8 over 17. And we are also told that theta is between 7 pi over 2 and 4 pi. Okay, so let's talk about where that is. The first time you go around the circle, that's 2 pi. So that's like 4 pi over 2. And this is 5 pi over 2 up at the top, 6 pi over 2 back over here. 7 pi over 2 is down here on the second time around. And then back here would be 4 pi back to the starting point, right? Twice around is 4 pi. So what we're learning is that our angle is in quadrant 4. That's important because cosine is positive in quadrant 4 and sine is negative. That matches with what we were given. We were given a positive cosine value. If we need a sine value, we're going to need to make sure it turns out negative when we do the math. Well, let's find out if we do need a sine value. So we're asked to find sine of 2 theta. And you know where I'm going to do. I'm going to go over to my list and I'm going to look for that sine of 2 theta identity. And let's write that down so you can see it here. It's sine of 2 theta equals 2 times sine theta times cosine theta. And sure enough, we do need both values. Right now, we know the cosine value is 8 over 17. We're going to need to figure out the sine value. And the way we do that is with our good old-fashioned triangle. So you go back to the triangle. Remember that cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. So I put the 8 in the adjacent spot and the 17 in the hypotenuse spot, adjacent over hypotenuse. And then I'm going to need to solve for this side here and I also am going to need a negative value. So whatever I come up with, it better be negative. Just like we did before, to get this value, I have to do the square root of 17 squared, which I believe is something like 289, minus 8 squared, which is 64. So I'm going to do the square root of 225, and that is 15. Remember what we said, because we're in the fourth quadrant, we need this to be negative. So we need the negative of the square root of 225. So we need negative 15. And so this side of this triangle is negative 15. That means opposite over hypotenuse is negative 15 over 17. So when I compute this answer, it's going to be 2 times negative 15 over 17 times 8 over 17. That whole value is going to be negative. It's going to be 2 times 15 is 30. 30 times 8 is 240. So it's going to be negative 240. And then 17 times 17, I believe, is 289. Oops, I put 299. Let's put 289. And then, like I said before, we're going to cross our fingers and hope negative 240 over 289 is one of our answers. And sure enough, it looks like we've arrived at letter A, which is the correct answer. So I'm 3 for 3 on your free answers today. So if you watched the video, you've got 3 free answers, and hopefully, more importantly, you've learned the strategy for solving these problems, and you can crank out the other 7 problems, submit your multiple choices, and get a great score on this thing. I hope this helped. If you're stuck, you know where to find me. Please don't be afraid to reach out. And in the meantime, take care.